a salesperson should walk away from a sale rather than sell something that would be a bad fit. And I have done that. So a salesperson must transmit to the prospect or buyer the notion that they are there to help them. And they're trying to, what I used to say to people is, my job was to get you promoted. If you buy what I'm selling you and you get promoted, then that's what I want. We both win on that.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Hello and welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today I am with Steve Weinberg, who has spent his life selling and helping others sell better, more, and faster. He recently led the Accuity sales team to new sales accomplishments for 12 years. Accuity is a British-Dutch technology company that is now part of Lexis Nexis Risk Systems and is a RELX subsidiary. It provides anti-money laundering and electronic payment solutions to financial institutions and corporations. While at Accuity as a salesperson and simultaneously as a manager of a team of salespeople, Steve closed the largest sale in the company's history. He has over 3 decades of leadership experience in sales, including vice presidencies at Dun & Bradstreet Software, AC Nielsen, SolCorp, and as a senior manager at Deloitte & Touche. He is an expert at building, guiding, and sustaining high-caliber sales and creating exemplary standards in account management. Steve led many sales kickoffs and introduced formal sales training at several companies. I'm excited to have you here and listen to your journey and put a little bit of spotlight on your path and as a sales leader, growing sales organizations and unlocking a little bit about the mystery of what it means to sell great products. And so, Steve, again, thank you for being here with me. I'd love to learn with you, what got you into sales in the first place? How did you discover that sales were your thing?
Well, I had somewhat of a unique path to sales. I started out in accounting, and I'm a CPA, and I loved accounting and finance, and I was doing very well in it and enjoying it. And the company that I was with decided to implement some software packages, and they assigned me the task of making sure that everything went well in getting it up and running. And so I did the first one, which was a fixed asset accounting system. And then after that, they had me do an accounts payable one, then a general ledger one, and then a payroll one. And then, and everything was going well for me in the company and in accounting. And then I went to a user meeting for the fixed asset system company. And I was offered a job by that company named McCormick & Dodge. I ended up moving back to Chicago, which is where I was from. And I got into sales very differently than most because I had never really aspired to be in sales. But I knew that the product that I was selling was much better than the competition. So I assumed at that time that this would be really easy to sell. And I found out a little bit later that it wasn't so easy. But I enjoyed entering in sales, and I was very successful in it.
Mm-hmm.
That was how I get in.
And what once you were in, what really kept you going and growing as a sales leader? What was it about was it about the actual action, the thought process, the strategy, the execution?
Well, I think initially it was the idea of bringing solutions to people, bringing solutions that I knew that would help them out. And so I have always been very consultative as a salesman. I felt my job was to help them fix the problems they had. I call that solutioning, meet with them. And since I was an accountant, and initially I was calling on accountants, I understood exactly what they were talking about there was no language or terminology issue. And I could meet with them and in a very non-salesy way and explain to them how what I had could help them out. And what appealed to me about sales coming from accounting really was the variety of meeting different people all the time, the challenge of making the sale. I'm a very competitive person. I think part of that is because I'm a very sports-oriented person. And of course, if you're successful in sales, it's very financially rewarding. And I earned a whole lot more in sales than I did in accounting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love the, learning, all about the learning experiences. So let's dive into a little bit about, being a good sales leader, right? And I want to focus the first part about sales and then transition to the leader portion.
Okay.
So, over your years as a salesman, what makes for an effective salesman?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer. But in my book, I listed 30 traits that I thought could be used to identify high performers. I found that when I hired salespeople, that my success rate wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Initially, it was very high because I tried to replicate myself and hire people like myself. And that doesn't scale up. So after 4 or 5 of these, I couldn't keep doing it. So I tried to hire people with good track records. And that didn't always work either. And I kept making mistakes. And I thought, well, what am I doing wrong here? And I tried to identify how do you find the best top performers? What I did find out was that they are very different from one to another. So if you took 5 top performers and put them right next to each other, it would be hard to find common traits between them. No matter, some of them are team players, some are not team players, some are extroverts, some are introverts, some are male, some are female, some are high energy people. But there are some traits that were common to all of them. For example, high egos. So normally a high-performing salesperson had a high ego, and sometimes that ego could get out of control, but that was one of the traits. I think also empathy.
How do you explain that, by the way? Why? What's the rationale behind that?
Well, these people want to achieve, and they want to be recognized for their achievement. They want to be known as the best person in the company, the best salesperson in the company. They want to be the one at the sales meeting that gets recognized for being the top person or one of the top people. They want to go on the achievement trip, or what we used to call the president's trip. And it was all about feeding their ego and looking good in front of their spouse and their family. It wasn't necessarily money. People think that salespeople are coin operated or money motivated. And certainly money is part of the equation. But I would rate money as about the 8th most important to a high-performing salesperson. There are many other factors that are much more important to them. Also, what I found was that the high performers had empathy for their customers. They really wanted to help them. The ones that did want to help them usually didn't do all that well. They weren't able to build trust with their customers and prospects. If you can't build trust, you're not going to make it. So there were a number of factors in there.
When we're looking specifically at trust, let's talk a little bit about that. Well, what have you learned to be effective modes of communication or different things that one could do to generate, healthy trust between you and the client?
Well, first of all, never lie to the client, and always have what I would call superior business ethics, and have their interests in mind, to the point where a salesperson should walk away from a sale rather than sell something that would be a bad fit. And I have done that. So a salesperson must transmit to the prospect or buyer the notion that they are there to help them. And they're trying to, what I used to say to people is, my job was to get you promoted. If you buy what I'm selling you and you get promoted, then that's what I want. We both win on that. So I wanted them to have success personally and business-wise. And of course, if that happened, then it would be also success for me as well. But the idea of building trust takes time. It doesn't happen immediately when you start calling on someone. It takes time, and it can be destroyed very quickly. So it could take months to build. It could take seconds to lose. So salespeople need to understand that, because if they ever misrepresent or lie or exaggerate, then all the trust that they built over the months that they've worked with the prospect will go away, and the prospect will normally buy from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's continue about your own journey. So you as a salesman and then as sales, and then I want to transition a little bit to the leadership side of your career. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, as I became successful in sales and as the company grew, I was promoted initially to be a regional sales manager and eventually to be a vice president of sales of the company. And then the company was later acquired by Dun & Bradstreet. And I moved on to other companies as a vice president of sales, and in one case as the president of the company. And while I was doing that, I developed what I called Steve-isms. Now, these Steve-isms were, I would hand people a sheet of paper with bullets on them, typically from 15 to 18 bullets. And I would explain to the salespeople what each of the items meant and how I wanted them to operate. And sometimes they were not obvious. So, for example, one of my Steve-isms was, if you're not winning, you're losing. And they would always look at me and go, well, is that obvious? Because, it's either one or the other. And I would say, no, it's not obvious. Because when I meet with you and I ask you questions and I find out that you really don't understand what's going on the account, then it's likely you're losing and you don't know it. So that's one of the Steve-isms. So there were others as well that I used. And through that, I was able to have a lot of success with bringing salespeople through the ranks, and had many people that became VPs of sales at the company I was with and at other companies as a result of my coaching and nurturing of them. My style of selling and sales management was very unorthodox compared to what many people were used to in other companies.
Yeah. So leadership-wise, what is it like, looking at sales as a leader?
What is it like to look at sales as a leader?
Yeah. Well, what does it mean to be a leader in the world of sales?
I found it really challenging. And every year, if I met my quota, they always gave me a much higher quota. So it was always a big challenge at the beginning of the year. And I always thought I wouldn't make the quota. So by the time I did make it or exceed it, I felt pretty good about it. So it was both personally rewarding to me to achieve that, but I think even more so to see people that work for me achieve their quotas. And what bothered me was people that didn't achieve their quotas, and I had to spend a lot of time with them. And sometimes I was able to help them out, and sometimes they just didn't work. So, and we had to move on. But I really enjoyed helping people. What disturbed me a lot, and was one of the reasons for me writing the book, was that historically, throughout all companies, about 50% of all salespeople do not reach their quota. And that's an astounding number. And in researching the book, I went to many sources and found that is a reliable number. Some people will say it's 48%, some will say 52 or 56%, but it's around half of the people. So as a sales manager, if I can change that number so that 60 or 70 or 80 or more percent of the people that worked for me were successful, then that was very rewarding to me.
Yeah. And so and then as you were exerting that leadership on others, continuing from the challenge and the rewards, how, even from a training perspective, I'm really curious to hear what did you find most helpful as you were training the salespeople that you were working with to become better through the different lenses of what you saw, in increasing performance, which sounds it's a little bit personalized and nuanced,
Right.
and not necessarily a playbook that you would give.
That is, my background being in accounting, I was very process oriented. So accounting is really a repeated process. We start at the beginning of the month and we go through a process. At the end of the month, we start all over again and we do what we call a closing. And then we keep doing it month after month. And at the end of the year, we do a yearly one. Well, in sales, I tried to put in a process as well, because as a sales manager and as a salesperson, we don't want to have everything work randomly. The best thing to do is to build a successful process that works well within the company. Now, what process in one company may not work in another company, even if they're selling similar products, because the process has to be oriented to the culture of the company and the salespeople that work there. And where I was at, we brought in sales trainers from many, many different companies. What I found was that every sales trainer had great ideas and what I would call nuggets that we could use. The problem was that most of the time when the sales trainers left, the information they gave us, the data, the worksheets or whatever we practiced, all the role plays, all of that went out the window and people just reverted back to what they were very comfortable with. And the company themselves, where I worked, most of them didn't enforce what they trained people on. The other part of that was that many of the sales trainers, and there are a lot of really good ones out there, but many of them have not updated themselves for the current marketplace, because the market today is extremely different from how it was even 5 years ago, and more so than 10 or 15 years ago. And I can get into the differences, but it's very, very different. So if a salesperson goes in and tells the salespeople, if a trainer tells salespeople how to do things that worked 5 or 10 years ago, they may not work now. And that they'll lose credibility and the salespeople won't follow the ideas that they have. So to sum it up, I believe in deploying a repeatable process that works and using that with the salespeople to kind of understand where they are in the sales pipeline, have common terminology that we use, and use that to monitor their progress on each account.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I love the process oriented approach. I'd love to finish off with hearing a little bit more about your book, above quota performance. The motivation to write the book, a little bit about what the main message was, and it sounds like a pretty interesting read.
Well, it really was kind of a labor of love for me. When I retired about 3 years ago, which was right just before the pandemic, I had in mind that I wanted to try to do something to impact the unsuccessful salespeople, to help them become more successful and to help the successful people become even more so. Before I left the company I was with, they asked me to help train the new people. And I really, really enjoyed that because they were very coachable and they sought knowledge. So what I did was I took those Steve-isms and I developed each one into a chapter. But my motivation for that, though, was unfortunately, I had seen the negative consequences of salespeople that did not meet their quota. And at best, those salespeople were put on a plan and they had to kind of what I would call walk the plank. They had to either perform or else, and they were let go and they had to find another job, which could be very disruptive for people. But I also saw that some salespeople lost their marriages, they lost their family, their connection with their children. Some lost their homes. That some were divorced, and in one case, one committed suicide. So I saw that, and it really upset me a lot. And I thought, well, if there's anything I can do to impact that in a positive manner, that would be a great contribution to the world today, to the sales world. And I really think I can do that. So what I've done with the book is I've put these ideas in there. The book is really more of a guide. It's a how-to manual. And it can be, there are 25 or 26 chapters in it, and it can be read sequentially, or you could select a chapter and decide to read that one. For example, I have a chapter on how to use LinkedIn.com to develop sales leads. Most people use LinkedIn.com for career development and for job hunting, but they don't realize that it's a terrific tool to develop leads. And in fact, I closed the largest sale in the company's history by a multiple of 8 by using LinkedIn to find the person and then to approach the person, build a relationship, and then start calling on that person. So the book, again, like I say, was really something I always wanted to do. And then once I retired and the pandemic hit, I had a lot of time on my hands and I was able to write it. And so far, I've received some very positive feedback on it.
I love it. Steve, I really want to thank you for coming and for sharing, especially this last bit. I think it's going to be very relevant to everybody listening. And congrats on an amazing journey and an amazing career. And I look forward to checking out the book myself and going back all the way to the beginning of all about, it's all about building trust. It takes months to build it and seconds to break it. There's no playbook. There are commonalities between top performers, but at the end, it's a personalized approach. And I really appreciate the time and the energy. So thank you very, very much for being here.
You're welcome, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.